What is up, Bitcoiners? I have an awesome episode of the Bitcoin Magazine podcast lined up for you today. This is Nozomi Hayase. She is an absolutely incredible thinker, philosopher, and freedom fighter in the Bitcoin space. Nozomi has a background in psychology, and she has taken that background and her lessons from kind of going through that education process and really laid it onto Bitcoin. And she definitely has some interesting historical understanding. And this episode gets absolutely cosmic. So you're not going to want to miss this one. It is going to blow your mind. And we're going to talk about Native American mythology and all this kind of stuff that you never thought would tie into Bitcoin. Before we get into this show, though, I want to tell you about our sponsor. It is the Bitcoin 2021 conference. This is going to be the Bitcoin conference of all time. There never has been an event like this. The mayor of Miami, Francis Suarez, has rubber sealed this event. It's going to be happening on June 3rd, 4th, and 5th in Miami, Florida. And guys, it is going to be absolutely amazing. Like I said, Mayor Suarez has rubber stamped it and is speaking, but we also have amazing speakers like Tony Hawk, Nick Szabo, Chamath. Who else? Gosh, so many more. Michael Saylor, Jack Dorsey. That's just scratching the surface. Those are just some of the headliners. There are so many Bitcoiners going to be at this event, and 2020 has been such a grind. Many of us have been thirsting for human interaction and Bitcoiner interaction in particular. And Bitcoin 2021 is going to be the ultimate place for that. Matt Odell is calling it the 200K party, and I think he might just be right. All right, guys, that is enough from me. Make sure to go get your Bitcoin 2021 ticket at b.tc/conference and use promo code Satoshi to get 10% off. Again, that is Satoshi to get 10% off. This event will sell out. Do not miss it. Let's get into this podcast with Nozomi. Bitcoiners, I am here with Nozomi Hayase. She is a longtime contributor to Bitcoin Magazine, a thought leader and psychologist in the space, and someone who's really been contributing some very interesting and fundamental work around privacy and Bitcoin usage. Nozomi, welcome to Bitcoin Magazine podcast.
Thank you for having me on.
So I guess why don't we just start off with like a brief introduction of yourself and some of the projects that you've been involved with, as well as your contributions to Bitcoin Magazine.
Oh, sure. So since 2010, when WikiLeaks published a Colorado Matter video, I started to write, and I ended up becoming a journalist. And mainly at the time, how I started writing was to counteract the official narratives against WikiLeaks, that efforts to discredit the WikiLeaks. I was trying to inform public, and so that's how I ended up becoming a journalist. And over the last 10 decades, what I ended up doing was that I ended up documenting the war, U.S. government's war against the First Amendment declared against the WikiLeaks. And then, as we all know, that this has evolved into long prosecution against legal battle that the WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange has been engaged in, and he's now he still remains in the Britain's Belmarsh prison, being psychologically tortured and not be allowed to even temporarily released. So that's kind of how I started writing, and then this basically when I started. I mean, I was before I found WikiLeaks. Actually, I was a student in clinical psychology program, and I wanted to become a therapist or a clinician, and mainly because I felt that there are a lot of suffering that the individual experience, and that's whether that is depression or some kind of relationship problems. But I found that this Western society, this consumeristic capitalism, really produces a lot of suffering, and mainly because it's connected to our lack of purpose and meaning in life. So I wanted to somehow mitigate that suffering. So I decided to become a clinician and then went into the clinical psychology program. And the little I, understood at the time that I was very naive getting in, and I soon was met with, kind of hit with reality that how the psychology itself has become certain kind of industry. The therapy has become industry, and in a sense that psychology became become complicit in perpetuating the oppression that we experience. So I did a lot of internal search and exploration, and I found something called liberation psychology. So then I basically left the clinical program and decided to study liberation psychology. And liberation psychology is basically there is this understanding that there's a force of oppression or control in our society, and that creates individual suffering. So acknowledgement of that meant so much to me. And then I studied and really believed in this body of knowledge to bring social justice or mitigate social oppression. And then I became very much in love with the theories and what I studied about liberation psychology very much. But at the same time, again, I met with obstacles or challenges that I felt like that this knowledge produced in academia, I guess, or in higher education, it's so much disconnected from the real world. And it's, I wanted to find a way to put that knowledge into action. And that's when I found basically the disruptive forces or revolution that have taken place on the internet. And that was led by WikiLeaks, and it was in 2010. And so then I got very much involved in, decentralized movements, from anonymous to, WikiLeaks-led global revolutions, and free flow of information, culture of transparency, all of those things. I just became fascinated with them, and I became part of it in some ways. So in that environment, basically, I eventually discovered Bitcoin, and then found, WikiLeaks. I mean, the Bitcoin has tremendous revolutionary potential in really mitigating and social oppression, and allowing me to actually do something I always wanted to do with liberation psychology. So, long story short, basically what Bitcoin presented a way for me to liberate myself first at the personal level, and allow me to think in a complete new way to bring about social change.
Yeah, it's awesome to hear you kind of express that experience, because I feel like a lot of Bitcoiners also have that experience. Bitcoiners often say things like, Bitcoin changes you more than you change Bitcoin.
Exactly.
Bitcoin fixes this. Bitcoin grounds you. Can you, I think part of what that understanding and that experience is knowing how much money affects your day to day and your real world experience. Can you kind of talk about like how money affects you and how us living in a fiat world is affecting
Right.
mankind?
So, I mean, for me, what I came to recognize is that at the psychological level, I first recognized that how we were made to trade our authenticity for acceptance or validation, recognition. And in this hierarchical system, where basically money is controlled and market is controlled, and then it's the money, whoever control money create incentives, the financial incentive to promote certain type of behavior attribute, but also certain type of personality, I think. And that personality I recognize is to be kind of, very much susceptible to commercial interest, superficial, very much extroverted, and that again creates, I think, lack of purpose and direction in life, and cut us off from spirituality or essence, and then of course it creates alienation from nature. create a culture that alienates, cut us off from nature, and that's very much, I think, seen, especially in corporate America, how it's really separated from Native American culture, indigenous culture that was deeply connected to nature. So this whole, I didn't realize how much it's the economic forces or financial forces that really control our behavior, and as I said, to regulate certain behavior, promote certain behavior, and punish certain behavior, and promote certain type of personality, or make us to conform to the dominant values, and make us be fake. And so when I first found out about the influence of economics in basically the psychological life, our internal life, it was so much eye-opening. And then it's really helped me to take, I think, what I learned in liberation psychology, learn from liberation psychology into the next level. And the liberation psychology that I learned touches on this, like to try to understand the force of oppression and control, and how it's going to affect us, and how it's going to prohibit us from expressing ourselves freely. But I didn't really have a way to address mitigate the force of oppression. And the Bitcoin, really, from my perspective, brought a formidable tool for us to actually start to change incentives, and then start to align ourselves with who we are. So so that was, I think, for me, important aspect that Bitcoin has brought. And Bitcoin has brought,
Amazing. Well, again, I can second kind of the experience, and really, it's like it's a mental model. Like once you have a Bitcoin centric mental model and worldview, it really changes every aspect of you. And to be honest, like me having a Bitcoin centric worldview has helped me immensely through 2020, and in navigating through all the craziness that we just endured for now it's getting close to a year.
Right, and I think that the one thing I want to add to this is that the dimension that I want to add to this is that we often Bitcoiners often talk about individual sovereignty and the freedom of expression, and how Bitcoin allows us to express ourselves freely. But something that I think we don't necessarily talk about is how Bitcoin allows us the right to freedom of association, and it enables the real social relations, directly that allow us to connect with one another through our heart. And so we so for instance, I used to work at the law firm in San Francisco, and this was something that I was equipped to, I had a skill for, but I didn't really care much about what I was doing, but I had to do for money and to make income. So I go there, sit there, in the office, and surrounded by my colleagues, lawyers and paralegals, and that I felt no connection with, to be honest. And I had to be there from 9 to 5, right, to make money. And after work, they ask me. I mean, they go out for happy hour to hang out, and then I didn't really want to spend time with them, because here, like, from all day long, I was sitting next to them, hearing their gossips and the TV programs that they have watched, or their relationship programs. They had they broke up with their boyfriends, or all those things that I had no interest in whatsoever. But I had to sit there and then just listen to them. And then now after work, like now I have to again go to drink a beer or something with them. And fortunately, I was not cool enough, so I never was invited to those happy hours. But that's the kind of example that people that my colleagues, most of them went there, and none of them, most of them actually did not enjoy their time there. And when I asked them, then why do you go there? And they say, well, because if I don't go there, I don't get promotion. I will miss out. I need to make connections. I need to just spend time with them, even though they don't enjoy. So that's kind of one thing I think Bitcoin allow us to really be authentic, allow us to be authentic, and then be able to have a free association with people that we like, people that we want to talk with, people that whose interests aligned with, and the purpose in life, all of those things. And I think, the one thing that, we often talk about how people quit their jobs, they were able to quit the jobs that they didn't like because of Bitcoin and Bitcoin price going up, and then, they have enough money. But at the same time, Bitcoin allow us to basically walk away from relationships, situations, and the people that that are not aligned with our highest good, or that necessarily don't serve for us. So I think that's that Bitcoin's ability to enable more authentic social relations, and I think at the global level, Bitcoin being the borderless, stateless currency, that I believe that the Bitcoin would facilitate cultivating fraternity. So we have liberty, and equality, and now with Bitcoin we can have fraternity, sense of brotherhood, and that would, really, I think, bring peace. So that's, I think, the one part that I feel, as a liberation psychologist, who pay attention to more psychological aspect, psychological domain of our life, that I became aware of it.
So, I mean, for someone who is listening to this and doesn't already believe that Bitcoin changes you, and when they are listening to you say that Bitcoin will bring peace, Bitcoin will help people socialize and be themselves more, like how do you break that down from first principles for them?
Well, I think that, the we have heard the rhetoric that the Bitcoin promotes peace, in terms of, how it would challenge central banks, and it would challenge the federal hegemony, and, it would mitigate the currency debasement, inflation, all of the things, so that the government cannot fund wars anymore, right? So that's economical argument, I think. But at the same time, I think fundamentally, peace is something that cannot that we cannot have unless we attain inner peace at first. And I firmly believe that each person attaining inner peace, that would, manifest into the external world, and we will find peace. And I think what Bitcoin does is Bitcoin enables the right to freedom of expression, and then, give us ability for us to basically not to answer to anyone, and when we don't have to answer to anyone, any kind of, whether, because the incentive will completely change. Incentive will be aligned with self-interest of everyone, so that everyone is allowed to act out of self-interest and express themselves freely. And so when that happened, I think that each person are allowed to explore, allowed to freely, pursue for their own unique paths to become individual. And I think that I firmly believe that we are all geniuses. And I use the term genius to mean, stick to the dictionary meaning of genius. And genius does not mean somebody who's exceptional. Genius means that it's a spirit given to a child at birth, and that's how, I like to define it. And from that perspective, we are all, given that gift. We are all given that spirit at birth. And then this society, our society, does not allow us to manifest that spirit, does not allow us to act freely out of that spirit, and express our geniuses and intrinsic value, share that intrinsic value with one another. So I think what Bitcoin does is allowing the right to freedom of expression. The Bitcoin allow us to become unique individual. And I think that when each person become unique individual, then we don't have to compare ourselves with anyone. We don't have to, try to do anything. Like I think our society really promote us to become somebody else, somebody other than ourselves, and that's the image that is given from the popular culture, whether that is the image of a celebrity or beautiful model, or successful business person, or all kind of hierarchical ranking, that this capitalistic society could promote, and make people to strive for that perfection, strive to attain that goal, which is not necessarily meant for everyone, right? So I think for me, it's when we find when we were finally allowed to become individual and realize that we are inherently valuable at birth without doing anything, and we are human beings, not human doings. So then we don't have to achieve anything. We don't have to go to good university, to be smart. We are already intrinsically smart and valuable. So I think that would create internal peace. It would basically, yeah, we don't, the competitive drive, so to speak, the destructive competitive drive, I would say, not the healthy one, but destructive competitive drive, aggression, or the activity to seek for permission, approval, recognition, all of those things, they would just fall away. And that's I think when we find internal peace, and then that would I think fundamentally create the world of peace. And I think that I think that the wars are created, war, destruction, exploitation, all of those things that our political leaders or psychopaths, so to speak, that they are engaged in. I think it comes from, I think, lack of self-acceptance, lack of self-love, and that drives them to always constantly seek for power, control, domination. So the only way to actually stop this is find a way to help us all help us all find the internal peace.
Yeah, adopt Bitcoin.
Exactly, and it's a very simple thing. I think we don't have to fight, we don't have to protest, we don't have to do anything. We just hold sats, and it's a peaceful act.
So wait, I want to jump in. So
Mhm.
again, I want to take the perspective of someone who might not believe you, might not believe us, so that way that this is a helpful podcast for them.
Mhm.
So can you explain again from first principles how fiat money enables what you would consider to be like unnatural behavior, negative competitiveness? It's something like everyone in the world today looks around and says like something is amiss. And then even a lot of like people who want like social justice or state controlled dominance, it's in order to correct the flaws of capitalism, right? So can you kind of talk about like where fiat money fits into all that?
I think that the basically world dictated by central banks creates it's a very oppressive mechanism, and it's create victims and perpetrator of abuse, right? And it's mainly because it's hierarchical, and it's a control mechanism, and anybody, like small group of people who can control monetary supply, then they can use it, and then they can use money to promote certain activities. So we've seen it through censorship, of course. The censorship from social media to academia and companies. It's spread everywhere, every aspect of life, actually. And what it does is that it's send a signal, like, okay, this is the kind of things that you cannot talk about. This is kind of things that you can do. It's reward and it's punishes. And what it does is that it's really we would be cut off from our own intuition, or what I say, like our authentic self, and start to conform to the basically the popular ideas, or the ideas that are promoted, and then start to shy away from engaging in activities that are seen as labeled as negative or bad, or unfavorable. So that's I think the mechanism of regulatory mechanism in some ways, and that is fake, because I think that what I mean as artificial is that it does not allow each person to connect with our our instinct basically. And then we all know, like, animals, for instance, if you observe animals, that they are connected to their instinct. They are governed by nature's law. And nature's law, that when lions are hungry, they hunt for rabbit, they hunt for food, and then when they become, they eat enough, then they stop hunting, for instance. And that mechanism is installed in all creatures, including humans. And then so when we create a society, we create a civilization that cut us off from this instinct, cut us from this laws of nature, then of course that, it pulls our society into artificial direction. So I think that's what was done by, central banks creating fake money, basically, artificial money. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, I think it does make sense. And I mean, I guess kind of going from there, like how much have you thought about what happens to the world once a critical mass of people have adopted sound money? Like, what does the world look like at that point?
I think that it would be diverse. I think that it promotes diversity. It would be I would like to think it would create social harmony, but not social harmony that is controlled from top down or somehow artificially made. But it's just each person acting out of their self-interest, and each person becoming unique individual. Somehow it would create order. Many people might think that that would create chaos. If each person is allowed to act freely, that will create chaos, and then that it's going to be mess. But I think on the contrary, that actually it would eventually create order. But that order is, that would be organic order. And so I think that it would be a diverse society. That's what I would think. That I don't say like it's good or bad, but I think it would be rich, diverse cultures, diverse opinions, and so that's kind of how I see it. It's the opposite of monoculture.
Yeah. And I mean, like, if I were to like look around at the world today, I would say that there's a very strong like English language based and led monoculture that we're seeing kind of like roll out. And the existing and I guess main culture never goes out without a fight, right? And yes, this monoculture is dominant, and sure, the sound money world has been introduced, but the existing predominant culture is not going to go out without a fight. Have you thought about like what that transition is going to look like? Maybe I think we're already living in that transition, right?
Definitely. I think, we're already living in this transition. And I find, I come from Japan, I was born and grew up in Japan, and English is the second language, that I kind of had this kind of always like a pressure for me to conform to this native language, like when I speak to American, for instance, English native speakers, that there is this, in the forcible oppression that sometimes I have felt, and I think in Bitcoin ecosystem I feel like I can find myself to be native in that environment, and actually that's one thing that I became in love with when I first interacted with the internet. The internet presented kind of like a borderless world where we could exist as beyond the nationality, race, and language, and religion, and all the things, and we could just simply become just humans, and in a sense that the Bitcoiners creating new language, for instance, new vocabularies, and it's made up of diverse people. And when I interact with Bitcoiners, it's not just Americans or Europeans. I mean, it's just from all over the world, and somehow we are reinventing our culture, global culture. And in English language, I find English language itself is changing. So, and I think English, in my opinion, is open source, and it should ever be open source. But somehow, corporate-led globalization and this the phenomenon of the U.S. empire really um, um, kind of colonized the English language itself, so that there is something created like standard English, or that everybody have to speak like them, speak like native English speakers, speak like British people, or the same thing happened to our culture as well. That there is this corporate culture, and corporate culture basically colonized all other cultures, multiple diverse cultures, and everybody have to conform to corporate values. And in that, of course, the people of color, the indigenous people, they lose so much because that corporate culture is foreign to them. It's nothing to do with their authentic beings. So in order to for us to adjust to that corporate culture, language, and belief system, even that we have to give up so much. And I think that we have traded, I think, our authenticity for acceptance. And then when I say acceptance, it's for some people it's acceptance is a way to get promotion, financial reward, recognition, fame. But for some people, it's that acceptance is for survival. Whether they have to give up their authentic self in order for us to live. And I think that's what Native Americans, for instance, have done. Many of us, I think, didn't have a choice but to give up our authenticity. And I think Bitcoin, native currency of the internet, I think gives us a tool to reclaim our own native culture. And what I found interesting is I've been very much fascinated with Hopi's prophecy. And Hopi is, I don't know if you know about them, but they are Native Americans who live, tribes who lived in northern Arizona, and they are known to be the peaceful one because they knew how to live in harmony with nature. And so they had this prophecy, and the prophecy has been very accurate in some ways. That they accurately predicted atomic bomb drop of atomic bomb in Hiroshima, Nagasaki, and then internet, invention of internet, airplane, and all of that stuff. And they have this idea that now we are living in something called the fourth cycle, the fourth cycle of life or dimension. And now this cycle is ending, and we are moving into something called the fifth dimension or fifth cycle. And in transition, there would be a lot of chaos, the wars, the ecological crisis, all kinds of the problems that might come up. And but then the Hopi described this as a period of purification. So everything that is not aligned with nature basically would be dismantled, would be destroyed, and the Hopi had this, their god was what they call the Great Spirit, and that they believe that the Great Spirit would come back and deliver justice. And I think that's, I see somehow, maybe Great Spirit is working with Bitcoin protocol and help us transition from this phase of life to another, and bring us back to nature, help us align with nature's way of life. And so that's what I see in this protocol. I mean,
It's really incredible how a decentralized ledger can inspire so many different connections in Bitcoiners' minds, and how that I've just seen and heard so many incredible metaphors and tries people's attempts to distill what Bitcoin is doing to the world.
Exactly. And if I may add that there's another interesting thing about Hopi prophecy is that there's a mention of lost white brothers, that they believe that there were white brothers that they were with Hopi, but then they separated and went to a different direction. And the Hopi prophecy basically, talks about how they would come back, they would return, go back and help Hopi, and bring them back their land and do justice. And then when I first found this white brothers, lost white brothers, I thought that it's a cypherpunks, that it's cypherpunks now coming back, and they're white, mostly white male, right? And so they are now on the internet, somehow find a way to open, hack our consciousness and open our civilization to connect us back to nature. So I find it's very
so I want to talk about this idea of Bitcoin bringing us back to nature. And on your podcast recently with Max Kaiser and Stacy Herbert, you talked about how Bitcoin aligns incentives, Bitcoin brings back the value in self-interest, and how self-interest has been something that's kind of been maligned by Western culture. And I'm only familiar with Western culture, so I can only speak to that. But can you talk about how Bitcoin aligns incentives around self-interest and why that's a good thing?
Well, I mean, I think that in Western society, I think actually it's compared to, I think, other cultures, the self-interest is promoted, I think, enough. And I would just give you an example of the culture that I grow up in, Japan, for instance, that there is this proverb that says, nails that stick out will be hammered. So the Japanese culture very much promotes group harmony, social harmony, and the interest of collectives over the interest of individuals. So, for instance, I could not act out of self-interest. Anytime, like, I try to speak my opinion or try to act out of my self-interest, that would be seen as selfish, and that it's actually socially regulated to provoke certain emotions, and these emotions are a sense of guilt, sense of kind of betraying your group, or a sense of shame that you are, or somehow like made me feel like I am being selfish, and then I have to change myself, change my behavior. I need to conform to this group values and protect group values, right? For instance, and so one of the reasons when I was drawn to the United States was because I really believed in the values of individual liberty, for instance, that this country was supposed to uphold. And so that kind of initially attracted me to this country. And then as soon as I got here, I realized that what we have in the United States is a false individuality, and in a sense that it's a little complex, but it's ended up creating the same effect as all other collective cultures. And I think that's what we are seeing in the left, the Silicon Valley social media, like Twitter, censoring, and then all of the things, but the importance of the self-interest is, of course, without us connecting with self-interest, I mean, I think that we were operating in a paradigm where if I become happy, somehow like the other person cannot be happy. Or if I become rich, then somehow I'm creating poverty, or other person is oppressed or something. So what Bitcoin creates is unifying system where that creates a win-win situation for everyone, basically. So me being rich, or me being happy individually, that enriches everybody in the network, that enriches everyone. So it's very important for me to pursue for my self-interest and to pursue for my own happiness. And then once you become happy, then you can help other person, for instance, right? And then also certain religious ideas, I think, that really promotes this idea of helping other people, or you have to sacrifice your own self-interest in order to help other people, or you need to be compassionate, kind, and empathic, etc., etc. And but if you think about it, that is actually, evolutionarily speaking, it's kind of suicide, because we have to put someone else before us, so before our self-interest. So no, we have to first nurture ourselves. We have to first, make sure that we are thriving and well taken care of. So then before we take care of other person. So that should be the foundation. And somehow I think many cultures, existing cultures have misunderstood, like that they haven't found a way to align incentives with human nature.
Sorry, I was muted.
Oh,
I mean, again, it makes sense, and it's hard to explain it unless you
right.
actually experience it. So I would implore people to learn about Bitcoin, because like it really does kind of align incentives there, and there does seem to be like this unity. Small or big holders, as long as you're a holder and you're part of the network, like you're helping everyone. And you just see example after example everywhere that Bitcoin touches. There's an alignment of incentives. Energy usage with mining, there's an alignment of incentives. Using the blockchain well, and batching, and just and all that kind of stuff. There seems to just be an alignment of incentives across the board, and it's amazing. Like either Satoshi's the luckiest man on earth, or there was a incredible understanding of human kind of how human beings function, because the system is extremely, extremely well aligned.
Exactly. And I think that what Bitcoin did to me personally is that Bitcoin helped me to think in a completely new way. And I think that, we were so used to having this, the world that kind of create a illusion of separation, that I am separated from you, and that somehow, that I we have this sense of individuality, but it's not placed in the reality of interconnectedness, and so that creates a divide, and that in the sense that if I become happy, then the happiness could be made in expense of someone. I'm taking money from someone, or I'm creating misery in somebody's life, which is the case in a fiat system, right? Because it's a fiat system engaging in exploitation, oppression, wars, and things like that. So that people in the US, for instance, they can afford to have, luxury consumer goods, 2 cars in a garage, and, in expense of somebody's life overseas, right? But the Bitcoin changes this paradigm, that Bitcoin allow everyone to become affluent and be happy, So then
everyone gets access to the best money in the world.
Exactly. Then everybody become happy, everybody become peaceful, and everybody become rich. I don't mean it in the material sense, but rich internally. And also, if you have money, somehow I think that the money has become a bad thing. Like if you recognize that people like socialists or activists, they tend to kind of, criticize people who have a lot of money, right? And I hear, like, I used to be a social justice warrior, actually. So I have a lot of socialist leaning friends, and they are kind of a little bit shocked with the fact that I promote Bitcoin, or I love Bitcoin. And then, the one of the criticism is that Bitcoin, is a kind of promote, like create another capitalism, or it's create wealth, and and for me it's like, what's wrong with being rich? And like the meme that we see on Twitter, like what is the
have fun staying poor.
Exactly, have fun staying poor. And I think that there's nothing wrong with having money, because money is resources, and then the more resources we have, we can invest that money, we can help other people, we can use that money wisely to build new systems, that allow everyone to benefit from. So I think that it actually also changes how we look at money. And everything. It changes everything about, every aspect of our lives. I think that's why I think that Bitcoin really made me rethink, think in a new way. And I need to, and I think that in this process, I think many of us feel like, we have lost our mind. And I think it's true. I think many of us have lost our mind, because now we are learning to think with the heart. And then the heart has its own intelligence, and it would inform us, it would educate us, it would allow us to think, together with nature. And we being a part of nature, when we manifest ourselves, when we start to align ourselves with nature, and the wisdom inherent in nature's law, that civilization, I think, would be much more, successful than the civilization that we artificially could build. So I'm very hopeful that Bitcoin allows us to somehow allow humanity to reconnect back to nature and create a new civilization,
Yeah, and I think that's an amazing place to kind of wrap up this episode. Nozomi, where can people find you? Where can they learn more about you? And what is your last word for the Bitcoin Magazine audience?
So you can find me on Twitter, Nozomi Imagine. That's my Twitter handle, and Nozomi with my name and the verb imagine. So Nozomi Imagine. And also you can visit my website, nozomihayase.com. And so I guess the last word is, to me, Bitcoin led me to self-liberation. And my next question really is that, can I liberate myself from Bitcoin? That would be like my next question.
Wow. All right. Well, we can leave the audience with that. And for all those out there, I'm sure you've been orange pilled. Take some of Nozomi's examples and some of her arguments for the moral and self-aligning outcomes and benefits of Bitcoin too, because the orange pill has a lot of benefits, in my opinion, and it's exciting to see how Bitcoiners are digesting and explaining this phenomenon, the sound money experience. So with that, you guys can find the show at Bitcoin Magazine. You can find all of our content at bitcoinmagazine.com, including some fantastic articles by Nozomi. And you can find me at CK_snarks. So make sure to share, like, subscribe, all the above. Peace.